Welcome to this presentation on defining a problem, challenge, or opportunity. In thinking about why we engage in scholarship, there are many reasons. It may be because we have simple curiosity about something. We might be commissioned by somebody else to find out something on their behalf. We might have a particular problem we want to address or understand, or face other kinds of challenges, or there may be an opportunity. In framing a good scholarly project, it helps to really think, therefore, about the problems, challenges, and/or opportunities that we face. And we can ask many different kinds of questions on that basis. Does something actually work? What happens when we can't do X anymore? Or we can't afford to do X? Or we now need to do something, but we don't know how to do it? Do we find that whether we do these two things together, one contradicts or disrupts the other? Does indeed doing this new thing or different thing cause new or emerging problems? Are there better or different ways of doing something? And given that we have to do something, what is the best way to do it? And there are many more questions. But by framing something in terms of particularly a problem, but also a challenge or an opportunity, then we can really think about the kinds of things that we can frame in terms of engaging in active inquiry. So let's concentrate on problems. We can start off with by defining a problem. And in doing so, we consider what the problem is. Is it a deficit? Is something missing? Is there a gap or a hole in what we're doing? Is it an issue of cost or sustainability? Are we considering about how much time it takes, or the scale, how many learners we need to engage? What kind of media we're going online or moving into a different medium? Location in terms of distributed programs. Is something failing or underperforming? Is there resistance to doing something, or an issue about how well people comply with it? Are there unwanted or conflicting messages in the way that something is being done? Is one thing compatible with the things around it? Is it well aligned with them? Is it integrated with them? Is the thing we're doing or seeking to do consistent? And how does it relate to our culture and our identity? Having defined the problem, and those aren't exclusive, there are other ways to define the problem as well, but having defined the problem, then we can then consider who the problem is for and how big a problem is it? And what are the consequences if the problem is not well addressed? And we can go further in terms of defining our problem, in terms of thinking about what do we already know about this problem? What do we know about it from our direct experience? What have we seen? What have we witnessed? What have other people discussed? But we can also go to the literature in terms of seeing what research or other kinds of studies have been done on the problem we're facing. From this we can get a sense of what do we not know? What is it that we are short of? What kind of knowledge do we need to acquire? And on that basis, we can think about what we do need to know in terms of the understanding about an issue or a problem, what we need to have as the basis for acting, and also the basis for doing further work in and around this problem. And as an example, we can think about a problem in terms of, for instance, the inability of postgraduate systems to fail substandard learners. This is a commonly recognized problem that's called the failure to fail problem. Well, how big a problem is it? Well, it's not clear precisely how big it is, but it would seem this is a system-wide issue. Pretty much every postgraduate deanery in North America and beyond struggles with the failure to fail issue. What are the consequences of this? Well, if unchecked, then it means that some physicians may complete their training without meeting all of the required standards, which in turn creates a potential patient safety issue. What do we know about this problem? Well, we know that it happens and it's difficult to fix. We know that it comes from a combination of time pressures and conflicts between mentor and judge roles, and from a number of other factors as well. What we don't know is what the best strategy or strategies are for fixing this problem. We are still trying to identify those and working forward on that basis. So what do we need to know? Well, we need to know what works in terms of addressing failure to fail issues, in what circumstances they work, and what they cost, and what other impacts making this change will have. Once we have our problem, we can then move on to thinking about a response. And in doing so, we can think about the kinds of core issues that are involved in that and the nice-to-haves. For instance, in the failure to fail issue, the core issues are we would need to make sure that that there is more attention paid to assessments so that failing learners or learners that are not meeting all the standards are ensured that they are meeting those standards and they are doing so before they finish their training. The nice to haves might be cost, or might be ease of use of this particular procedure, or things that are not necessarily critical but would be nice to have alongside it. And in doing so, we also need to think about the nature of the solution that we come up with, the nature of the response. In terms of, for instance, is it about acquiring or developing knowledge or understanding? Is it about persuading individuals or changing their behaviours? Is it about mitigating or remediating problems or issues within an activity or a system? Or about changing or even reinventing the activity or system? Or maybe even about creating an activity or system from scratch? And it may also be, to an extent, about accounting, about describing and owning our strengths and weaknesses to others and individuals. Which takes us to thinking about the issues around utility and translation. Given that health professional education is a field which has an implied dimension of quality assurance and or improvement, then there is an implied translation to practice, that the work that we do will be used in practice and therefore will need to be considered and developed and conducted in that light. In which case we should also think about how scholarship is to be used. Who is going to use it? What are they going to use it for? How generalizable is the kinds of things that we're going to discover or work on going to be? How accessible is it going to be in terms of its complicatedness, its complexity, the language and means through which it's expressed? And how relevant is it going to be to practice? We also need to think about some pragmatic decisions. You have to cut your cloth to suit your means, and you can't do everything. You can define the most wonderful, most perfectly considered research study where every single question is being asked, but it might take you 10 years to conduct, and you need an answer in the next 2 months. In which case you have to make compromises. You have to address the limits in terms of time and money, the skills you have available to you, access to whatever it is you're trying to research, the needs of the stakeholder community, the ethics of conducting this research, and what it is we can understand, and indeed what is even possible to understand about a particular issue or phenomena. In doing so, we might need to think about, well, might not be able to do this in one study, which means maybe we need to do several studies, which in turn starts to point towards conducting programs of inquiry, programs of studies, multiple studies that address larger, broader, more intangible questions that cannot be addressed in a single study. We can also engage in many different modes of inquiry to pursue these kinds of issues and to address different kinds of problems. So, for instance, meta-scholarship, which is about looking at, and the scholarship of scholarship, which is about considering the methods and tools we use, the way that we publish or translate the material that we create through scholarship. We can think about modes of inquiry that look around evaluation, which is considering value, whether things are good or bad or better or worse. We can think about inquiry which is to do with translation, about taking things from elsewhere and seeing whether they are effective in a new context. We can engage in inquiry that's to do with research, which is about inductive knowledge and theory testing, about generating knowledge and theory. We can look at acts of innovation, which is about new things, new ideas, things that have not been done before, things that are completely new to the field. We can think about conceptual work, which is about working deductively on knowledge and theory, as in working from principles, working logically and analysing and critiquing what it is that we have as the models and the approaches we have. And we can also engage in acts of synthesis, which is to do with what do we already know from the literature, how do we know it, and what do we not know on that basis. So, in summary, we can think about, and indeed need to think about, the purpose or drivers for inquiry. What is the story we're trying to get across? And it's useful to define this in terms of a problem, a response, a mode of inquiry, the way that that's going to be translated to practice, and the limitations that are going to be faced and how they're going to be worked around. Indeed, having a clear problem or purpose sustains and provides relevance and links to utility for research that would not be the case in the absence of having a clear problem or purpose that you're trying to address.